My name is Freeman Michaels, and I'm running for Congress in California's 52nd District as an independent. Politically, I can best be described as a progressive libertarian, guided by a live and let live philosophy. While I am a snowflake, and I believe that is my strength, I appreciate what conservatives bring to the table. Throughout this campaign, we will be uniting the left and the right around the creation of a new cooperative economy that is recession-proof, corruption-proof, and greed-proof. If you would like to know more, visit my website at humanitarises.info. From my heart to yours.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to We the People. That was a campaign ad for Michael Freeman. He is running in California's 52nd District, Congressional
Freeman
District.
Michaels.
You're right, Freeman Michaels. My gosh, I just blew the intro. It's because we know this guy. We know this guy, and I've been talking with him. Actually, his name was Michael Freeman, and then he reversed that. He's actually a really cool guy. He was a Bernie 2016 TV volunteer before he decided to run for office, and he actually created one of the most iconic videos that we play all the time on this channel. Actually, we play it on all of our channels, and we're going to run it again at the town hall coming up, and I'm going to play that in the middle of this show for you guys. But right now, we're going to get to meet him. Freeman, thank you for joining us on We the People.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I'm glad that video is getting more play. That was actually the first video I did that got more than 1,000 views.
Nice.
And the last time I checked, it had, I think it was 150,000 views on Facebook, and I didn't even put it on Facebook. Somebody else put it there.
Wow.
And I don't know how many the one I put on YouTube. So
It's a favorite.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for that video. Thank you for volunteering for Bernie 2016 TV.
Sure.
Before we move on, I want to bring in Laura Livengood because this is an engagement broadcast. Laura, please tell them what you'll be doing and how they can engage.
I am going to be looking for your questions in the live chat because if you're watching us live, you're a special group that gets to ask questions directly of our guest. So if you have a question, though, please tag me or write the word question all in caps so that I can see it because I'm actually trying to pay attention to the interview. And I will come in a couple times during the show and ask a few. I probably can't get to them all, but I'll do my best.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura. Freeman, so you were a volunteer with us, and you made an awesome video, and you really helped us back in the early days with a lot of stuff. What, from then till now, why did you decide to run for California's 52nd Congressional District?
I kind of got forced into it, and it was last December, probably about a year ago, and I had this feeling that the world was going in the wrong direction. I had the feeling that America was going in the wrong direction, and I was kind of making mental preparations to not to necessarily leave the United States, but to prepare for a world that was not kind of what we were promised as kids.
Right.
And I was kind of faced with that decision. Well, I could run away and not do something, or I could try and change things that I cannot upset. And I never saw myself as a politician. I still kind of don't, but sitting back and doing nothing wasn't really an option anymore.
Totally get that. Totally get that. So volunteering for a network wasn't enough. You needed to do what I consider to be the most difficult thing out of all this, and that is run for an office. How has it been so far? What have you experienced?
I'm not taking the normal path, so it's been amazing so far, but I'm not fundraising, and people can give me money to the campaign, but I don't think I'm going to need much money to win. I went through the Democratic training, and the only thing that they really seemed to be obsessed about was how much can you fundraise, and that was kind of like the only thing. How you were a good candidate if you could fundraise. And I even asked the question, I'm like, well, at what point do we engage the voters? Because it was always like, here's our platform, here's what we're going to do for you.
Right.
But what point do you actually talk to the voters? Because, I don't know if they realize it, but the voters are pretty upset and people aren't very happy with either party. And to just continue on like nothing's going on and you should do everything the same way and not have at least a voter outreach or, hey, what can we do better? The writing was kind of on the wall, at least for the National Democratic Party for me. And as far as the San Diego Democratic Party, they're great people, but they're still, in my opinion, trying to solve the problem the old way. And I don't think that's going to work.
What do you mean by that, the old way? What is that?
It's everything is about money, and once you raise a bunch of money, you use that with the regular vendors that they already have, and you mine voter data, and you send flyers, and you do robocalls, and if you can just do that much more than the other guy, you win. And I think you have to do that kind of stuff if you have a product that people don't really want to buy. And I don't think, I mean, I'm quite certain that conservatives aren't happy with the Republican Party, and I know progressives aren't happy with the Democratic Party. And if you are going to compete in one of those two institutions, you kind of have to toe whatever line, or at least be somewhat similar to whatever line their donors want. And that right there is kind of setting you off in the wrong direction. So even if you were, wanted to change the world and you were in it all for the right reasons, if you do it the way they suggest, I don't see how you're going to fix anything.
All right. I can go along with that. It definitely comes down to, we're getting an echo there out of your side. It definitely comes down to me, for me, it comes down to which side of the Democratic Party. I really believe there are two factions right now.
Absolutely.
And,
absolutely.
The progressive, like when you said the progressives aren't happy with the Democratic Party. No, I'm not happy with the federal level. I'm certainly not happy with the national level of the Democratic Party. I think it's even the Unity Commission. I know Nomiki Konst did a great job and everything, but I don't.
It was a great interview. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't believe it. I still don't think there's anything going to come out of it. There's still superdelegates, right?
No. Well, here's the thing: is I see this a lot on Twitter, and they're like, "Why won't the Democrats learn their lesson?" And I'm like, they know what they're doing. Their goal isn't to serve the public. Their goal is to stay in power while they can fundraise, while delivering a progressive-ish light platform. But if they ever solve the problem, they're not going to be able to fundraise on, the problems of the world. So they're not really incentivized to solve the problem, and I think that's a big problem.
Absolutely. I want to answer you had a question. There's no people contact with the candidates. That's what happens when you dial for dollars. See, you call the phone. Well,
and even the campaign guide, and I even looked something up online, is like how to run for office for dummies type of thing. and it was all about fundraising. Even the party list thing, and it said you want to hire your staff to do all the things that the candidate can't do, because the candidate has to be focused on the things that only the candidate can do.
Right.
And that was fundraising.
Right.
And I honestly, I mean, I have that moral stance against fundraising. It's not something that I want to do or that I believe in, but I honestly don't have the mental makeup required to sit there on a phone for hours a day and ask people for money. It's like I quit my other job because it wasn't that interesting. This would be even less interesting. So that's not something I'd be willing to do.
It dehumanizes. I don't know. No wonder we have a Congress like we do.
Right? I mean, what does it do to someone's mental ability when you sit on the phone all day and ask for money, and just like it's like you're really, I mean, you're selling yourself, but you're also really putting yourself way down, and I can't be an uplifting experience.
No,
I don't want any part of it.
If money becomes what it's all about, then why not just take money, right? I mean, you've got nothing else to go for it. You know what happens to them. We see them on C-SPAN. They're sleeping. They're just tired. Right?
And besides, I got Bitcoin, so I don't really need to fundraise.
We're going to talk about that. I noticed we've got a quote from you on that, and I want to talk about that because you're one of those guys who understands cryptocurrency and what's going on with all of those things. So I want to ask you about that. Yes, I have no idea. I honestly don't. I don't know anything. I'm even less with money. I wish it didn't exist at all. I don't want it to have anything to do with anything. Unfortunately, we need it.
Economy.
What?
Resource-based economy.
Okay. Yeah, I'm all about that. Let's talk about that. What does that mean? So go into it. Tell us. What is this?
Oh, well, I'm not advocating the resource-based economy yet. I think that's too giant of a step. So that's actually why my platform is, I mean, if we want to jump into that, it's effectively creating a new cooperative economy, as the intro said.
All right.
And the central node of that is open source philosophy marries small business. And when you have a group of open sourced businesses, they form what I'm calling a cooperative economy. And just by the fact that they're operating out in full view of the public means that they are applicable to social pressure. And when you have that social pressure, you no longer need laws to keep you in line. So as an example, I like to throw this one out. If you wanted to, say, pay a certain segment of the population less than another segment of the population for doing the same job, good luck being able to do it in a cooperative economy, because the financial transactions are all out in public display. You wouldn't be able to do that because no one would want to buy your product if you're openly being discriminatory in your pay.
Interesting. So everybody would know what everybody gets paid. Is that what you're?
Yeah, and in that, it's funny. I mean, I use that as an example, but that's actually one small fraction of it. But yes,
Okay.
you would see everyone's salary, and you would see every payment that your company makes and every payment that your company receives.
Interesting.
And I don't think that the future is going to be large multinational companies doing things like this, because in like a lot of people, when I talk about the cooperative economy, they're trying to fit it into how it works in capitalism, and it's going to be a completely different mindset. It will be much more like, I like to say this because it's fun, it'll be much more like a large number of micro dictatorships, whereas people or a small group of people can run their open source cooperative, their business, the way they want, and as long as they adhere to the open source standards, then they are directly contributing to humanity in addition to making money for their own business.
Sounds like a midway between like Star Trek Federation type government.
Well, you mentioned the resource-based economy. That is Star Trek, and I mean, they obviously have a little more technology, and they can just create food out of thin air. But the same concepts actually can apply, and that is that they are no longer. And I think I'm geeking out, but Picard even had an episode where he talks about, or maybe it's a movie where he talks about that they no longer pursue money; they are
Right.
pursuing what they want in life. And my platform is a step in a direction where that will allow us to decide if we want to go further in that direction. So in my campaign platform, I'm talking about I want to implement the open source economy in food, news, and health.
Okay.
And just those three things aren't going to replace capitalism. But if we are, say, independent of Monsanto for our food supply, and that is our entire population is independent in their food supply, that's not something that the large food distributors or Monsanto are going to be happy with. But that gives the population the independence, at least with food, that they would need. And then we do the same thing with news, because I think we have corporate filtered news where they seem to like war and division. And if we get our own news network that is unfiltered and independent, then I think we will get a lot better quality news.
All
And
right.
the same thing can be said for health. If you pretty much do not need the health insurance industry. That's an industry that does not even need to exist. And the drug industry has a little bit too much power, in my opinion, just a little bit too much. And if we start to open source that and take control of it ourselves, then that kind of leads to our freedom.
Well, so I totally agree with you there. I see the leap. It's definitely a leap.
Yeah.
So how do
There's no
you?
question.
So how, as a representative of District 52, would you usher in this new era? What kind of legislation for just for business would you
Yeah.
usher in to try to make this happen? And how do you make it appealing to business?
Yes. It's not going to be appealing to anyone who is obsessed with making more money and gaining control. And it is going to be appealing to people who don't have jobs or don't have enough jobs, have insecurity, or want to change the world. So it's going to be a phased in approach. And I would say that especially for larger businesses, there's not going to be that much of an appeal unless you're a goody goody. What it comes down to is that the business is generally not going to make that much profit, but the people are still going to get paid. So that's the initial step. And the funny thing about talking about this is it absolutely changes if you're 1 year in, 2 years in, 5 years in, or 10 years in. But initially, it will be the small businesses. And you mentioned legislatively, that's really interesting because we don't need any legislation. We could literally start it tonight. There's no reason why you couldn't start your own small business and share everything that you've learned and make your finances public, because that's all that is needed.
Sure.
That's really the only shift.
But
so
what's
there's no
the advantage
legislation
of doing
you can
that
do.
without being a part of a cooperative that's also doing that? I guess
I'm
what I'm
sorry?
saying. So if I started, okay, tomorrow I say, hey, Laura, Live and good. Tell Larry to share everything
Yeah.
with everybody. Right? Show up. Yeah. I mean, what is that? I mean, so I set precedent, but where does that take? How does that help the average worker? How does that help?
Well, it's going to be a couple-year process. I think we've had several decades of the middle class being drained, and I don't think there's any quick fix.
Okay.
But right now, people are obsessed with jobs because jobs is what they need to feed their families. And I'm kind of saying, let's cut out the middleman. And while we still need money, we're still living in a capitalist world, but let's start to feed ourselves. You ask, where's the incentive? Well, the incentive is there's a bunch of people that are underemployed and unemployed, and they can be put to work feeding their local communities and building community, doing food just initially.
Sure. Okay.
So that's how it starts.
Okay. Okay. So you're talking co-ops around things that I'm trying to break it down. And basically what you're talking about is really setting us up locally to distribute Maslow's hierarchy of needs, starting with the very bottom of the pyramid. Right?
It's funny because it's almost like supply and demand on steroids. And this is one of the reasons why I think conservatives are going to take to this, because it doesn't involve big government or doesn't involve any government. And they like capitalism because of that. You see what you put in and you see what and you know what you get out. And that's why conservatives really like capitalism. And this will be like that on steroids. Effectively, this removes the greed and corruption from that equation, but it's still the same thing where it's supply and demand.
That's some interesting stuff. I would say that very few of us in the middle class have any idea what happens when we put in where it goes and what we get out of it in the capitalist system.
Go to somebody else.
Steve Mnuchin might know. I'm going to take a break and ask Laura Livengood if we have any questions from the audience.
No, we do not, but you're on a roll. This is great.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Hi,
Good to be here. How many of you in the chat right now remember Freeman Michaels from the old days? You really weren't on much, but you were in the back end.
No.
Yeah.
I did on election day, I held up a sign that said, finally a candidate worth voting for. And I think that picture got 100,000 likes. I was like, what?
Nice.
Nice.
We knew you as El Freemano.
Yes,
that's how we know him.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's funny when people call me El. I'm like, I just chose it. I live in San Diego, and a lot of us speak Spanish down here. So I was like, El Freemano, why not? And then running for office, you can't really.
Right. Do you speak
Had
Spanish?
to grow up. Solo poquito.
Do you speak Spanish?
Only a little.
Okay, yeah. Same thing. Let's, because I'm thinking that's beneficial these days, right?
Yeah.
To really create.
I can't conversate. It's effectively I can point and grunt, and I can conjugate a couple verbs.
Yeah. Well, California could flip the House, and these 13 races will make a difference. One of them is yours. California's got an opportunity here to do some pretty cool things. You're running as an independent, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's really not going to affect. I mean, it does affect the Democratic Party, but you're a progressive. And actually, let's clarify. You're a progressive libertarian.
Yes.
So my guess is you would vote mostly along Democratic lines, as long as it's not some kind of an establishment scam. Do you want to define your stance there?
Absolutely. I'm a progressive. I view the world through my heart. The final decision comes from my heart. And where I believe conservatives, it tends to be rationality. They want to know the long-term logic of a system, whereas progressives tend to want to, at the end of the day, you want to know that your decisions were moral and they were just. So I'm still progressive in that regard, but progressives tend not to trust capitalism, so they go to government. But I don't trust the greed of capitalism, but I no longer trust the corruption of government. So that's why I kind of go with the libertarian route. With regards to how I would vote, I can't say that I would vote for the Democrats, but I'm not, like a lot of libertarians, they want to just vote out government policies because they don't believe in government. And I don't think that's a responsible thing to do unless you have a landing point.
Right.
And the most classic example is single payer. And this is something that progressives are all in favor of. I generally was in favor of it a while back. I now no longer like it,
Oh,
but I would be willing to sign it because I think it's better than what we have. And I think that would be the responsible thing. I have too many friends that don't have decent health coverage. And I think single payer would help. I would prefer the public option with strengthening Medicare. But at the same time, that's almost potato. At the end of the day, the people need to take control of it and not the government.
nice. Well said.
Yeah. And it's funny saying people need to take control of it because that sounds like such a conservative thing. It's almost to the effect of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But it's not. I'm taking it a step further because I don't trust capitalism. I think I don't know. I don't know how anyone could really trust it these days, but I also don't know how anyone can really trust politicians and our government these days. So it seems like we really need a third option that's on the side of people.
Well, I trust capitalism when it's regulated. I don't like it because I hate money. But when there's a lot of regulations in place, Frank Dodd, whatever. I mean, where you're headed is definitely progressive, and I like it. But
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to make those kind of sweeping reforms in a year, 2 years, not even 4 years. No matter how hard you work. So what would you do in the short term? What kind of ideas would you put forth? And I mean in terms of regulating business in just in general in the state, because it seems that business is really getting away with murder here, literally murder.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. I don't have any regulations off the top of my head. I mean, that's kind of one of those common sense things that you shouldn't be doing this. And you see some of the stuff that's written and you're like, who wrote that? And it's generally the people who are being regulated wrote that.
Right, of course.
And I'm not in favor of that whole process because, again, I don't trust government to do it right. And I trust businesses to continue to be greedy. And a great example was free range chicken. And people want the animals that they eat to be healthy and not mistreated in general. You don't want your food to be tortured just so you can get it for 50 cents cheaper or the company can make more profit. But the food industry lobbied to have free range defined as long as the chicken could move around and have 2 inches in front of its beak or so. It was something absurd like that. And I don't feel like even if you did a good regulation around that companies they're going to try and get around it anyway. The rule of the law of the land seems to be if you can get away with it and stay out of jail, it's okay. And that's kind of how people with a lot of money and interests with a lot of money operate. And I don't think that government really can regulate capitalism that well. And that's kind of the problem. Capitalism is like this global game of musical chairs where everyone's encouraged to be a complete jerk to each other as they fight for resources. And it doesn't have to be that hard. Certainly not with the technology and the availability we have with energy and now today.
Sure. I'm with you 100%. I just I don't know what we're going to do. Maybe incentivize businesses to want to be nicer, right?
Well, no, I think that businesses are generally going to do what they're going to do, and we have to accept that. And that's where I'm at. I'm like, there's capitalism, it's going to do what it's going to do, and then there's government, and neither of them are on our sides. And you can try and make them better, and I absolutely will. There's no reason not to. If there's a regulation that's going to work well, absolutely. If there's a government program to cut out that's not doing well, absolutely. So that's all common sense.
All right.
But in terms of like capitalism is headed in a direction and regulation can't change that. Like the definition of capitalism is infinite growth on a finite planet. And anything that is unsustainable by definition will cease to be. And I think we're kind of at that, Tom Hartman calls it the cancer stage of capitalism. And I tend to agree. With capitalism, there just aren't enough jobs out there for people to get work, because the number of jobs is dependent on how much stuff we buy. And if it's more efficient to buy stuff, there's not going to be that many jobs. And the Republican response is, well, go out and be, Bill Gates or Tim Cook or Elon Musk. And I don't think there's that many products out there for people to buy, or that many services for people to buy to make everyone a Bill Gates or a Steve Jobs that doesn't have a job now. So I think we're at that point of capitalism where it is going to start to fail, and it is going to start to fail in more obvious ways than is seen now.
All right, I agree with you there. I will say that So where do we head next? It seems like more towards socialism because we need more social programs, and I say that because you talk about jobs.
Yeah.
Jobs are dependent on things we need. Right now, we need things like homes and food. We need
Mhm.
solar panels. We need energy. So we need infrastructure. So we really could create lots of jobs in a works program.
Yeah.
What do you think about that in terms of infrastructure build, and what do we need to do with that?
I certainly love the idea of building up infrastructure. I'm, again, hesitant to let the government be in charge of it. I would certainly be okay with it because there's a lot of money there and you can do a lot of good things with a lot of large projects. But I think the future of humanity is going to be doing it at the local level. And right now, the community doesn't have a say if you're going to build a new road or build a new apartment complex or how wide the lanes are going to be. The average person has absolutely no say over their environment that way. And when we build up the cooperative economy, certainly not initially, we're just working on food, news, and health. But as that concept continues and people start to take control of their lives, they will be in control of things like building roads, building cities, and whatnot. That's a decade out, but honestly, it's not that much of a stretch
All right.
when you follow each step.
No, and I could see that happening. I just want to posture the idea that people can have much more control over that if we fill all the roles in our government that are empty
Yeah.
or held by, criminals. Like you're
It certainly helps when criminals aren't ruling the planet. That's for sure.
right, right. And then at the local level, you got the same thing. I've heard story after story of doing these interviews of, this person did this, got to cut back and screwed the town. Right. It's just a constant,
Yeah, and that's why I struggle with the institution of government because it kind of promotes that. And I just even saw someone today saying, "Why aren't more progressives running with this and this and that?" Oh, it was Namaki Konst actually. She tweeted it, and I responded that people aren't doing it because it's difficult. And
Right.
who would want to subject themselves to 8 hours a day of fundraising for 8 months? Like
Right.
like you're already limiting the type of person that would even run for office, let alone facing public ridicule. So
Yeah.
I have a problem with the system, but I also don't think it makes sense to throw away the entire system that we have now. It's like I want to clean up government and I want to clean up capitalism, and I will work on that. I just don't have long-term faith in either of those two systems because over the long run, I've not seen either of those systems give a crap about people. Neither
Not
of them.
here.
And when you have 50 years of declining the middle class, or in my case, I've seen access to healthcare in my 40 years of living drop. It's like I can only sit by idle so long and let these two systems, which obviously don't give a crap about me or my friends or my family, I can only sit by so long and just let it continue.
I agree, and I hope we move beyond democracy to a social democracy, and then beyond that to whatever you're describing. I will say that from what I hear from people like Marcus and Katie and other countries, they're doing better in a lot of ways. Right?
Yeah.
Because they seem to be more socially forward, and they seem to be the people are more engaged. Their whole process. Now, they're still democracies, they're still capitalists, but they're really more balanced. And it seems, you're what you're working on is that whole taking care of needs in a cooperative way, and that seems to me like once you start taking care of those basic needs, health, food, shelter, water that's clean, air that's clean, babies that can live, that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
that people are less irritable and don't
Oh,
want to
yeah.
beat on each other as much. It's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. When you increase the size of the middle class, almost every indicator of how well people are doing improves, including, and this is one where I'll probably depart from progressives, including gun control. And I think, and I'm not for, I have one gun. I'm not an ammosexual. I haven't named it. I don't love it, but I have friends who love their guns. And as long as we're not having military grade weapons, I find that the generally conservatives, ammosexuals, I like to call them, they're not the ones causing problems. Like they are so unbelievably meticulous about gun safety and their guns. And if you increase the middle class, the gun violence just drops way off. And that keeps avoiding the discussion because neither political party has an interest actually in solving that problem. The Republicans, of course, use NRA, which I don't really know a whole lot about them other than they have some interesting history. And then, of course, the Democrats want to do gun control. And I've seen some of the stuff that Democrats have proposed gun control. Some of it makes sense, and some of it you're like, wait a minute, what the F? It's like, okay, we can have 8 bullets, but not 9. And it's like they do that to kind of throw, food to their base. And I think that's an unhealthy way to be. I mean, it's effectively there's no money in unity because both parties right there are preaching division.
Right, and neither party wants to talk about the real issue, which is educating the citizenship. When you talked about increasing the middle class, really what we're talking about is filling their brains with more than Dukes of Hazzard and shitty beer, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and and God forbid they not be stressed out about making your rent payment if your car breaks down, or saving for education for your children, or having access to healthcare. I mean, if people are stressed out about having access to healthcare, how is it that they're going to live a fulfilled life? You can't do that while you're stressed out about the basic needs.
Agreed. Let's talk about guns a little bit more, but first I want to show everybody your district map. And then, so it looks like you're kind of scattered above San Diego there with some interesting pieces. Is this because of some kind of gerrymandering, or is it just a weird area?
I'm sure it is. That's kind of central San Diego, but I don't know if you're still looking at the map, but like there's areas of Del Mar and Solana Beach and Carlsbad that are obviously more affluent, and they didn't want someone who's representing Miramar to represent Solana Beach, and tell that they got Encinitas and Cardiff and all that there. So I'm sure there's that.
Okay, so now my next question is, in your district, like I didn't even get a chance to look at how they were. I mean, the guy who's in there now is just a run-of-the-mill Democrat, right? Establishment Democrat. Yeah.
He couldn't be the more perfect Democrat for the Democratic Party.
Okay.
He doesn't cause problems either way. He doesn't cause problems for people. He doesn't cause problems for the party. I don't know much about the guy. It seems like a nice guy.
You tweeted him.
But it's almost like he doesn't even have to exist. He's just kind of whatever the party line wants, he will do it.
So things are smooth in District 52. And the reason I asked that is because you're talking about guns, and I want to know, is the constituency out there really? Are you got a rural aspect? A lot of guns down in the San Diego area?
There's not a lot of guns. I mean, we have military bases, but we have a few gun shops and people shoot their guns there. But no, I don't. Honestly, I don't see a lot of police violence, and I don't see a lot of gun violence here. I mean, not that I would see it, but I certainly don't see it reported.
All right. Yeah. I mean, you got a lot of area out there going into the inland, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know what's out that way.
There's a lot of mountain area. There's the Wild Animal Park out there, which is a bizarre have in my district.
Well, so that talks about climate change, right?
Yeah.
So, what is a libertarian view on climate change, or a progressive libertarian view on climate change? What do we need to do there in your vision?
I believe that climate change will be solved naturally through the cooperative economy, because when you are, someone described it back to me as the hyperlocalization of services. When you no longer need to transport your food around the planet, then things like that are actually going to have a direct impact on climate change. And when I'm initially starting off with food, news, and health, and then the phase after that is education, energy, and transportation.
Okay.
And just addressing those pretty much addresses climate change, and you don't even need a global agreement that Trump can sign or walk out of. And it's basically, it's putting power directly into the people's hands. I think it's a little naive to expect for-profit companies and governments that really are corrupt and only want to stay in power to adequately address climate change. I don't think there's enough incentive for them to do it.
No, well, they look like they're mounting an effort, but I agree with you, because while they're mounting an effort, they're also selling coal or shipping oil. It's yeah.
I just don't trust the Democratic Party to have people's interests in mind, because they seem so detached from the party. They seem far more interested in keeping progressives at bay while maintaining power. And that seems to be their main focus. And I don't think if you solve any problems you can't really fundraise off of them anymore. So there's not really a whole lot of point.
Well, okay, I got you there, but that's at the federal level. Now at the local level, You talk about putting it in the power in people's hands. So are we talking about what I want to do, which is solar panels on everybody's roofs, battery pack in their garage, and we're sharing a net of energy? Is that where we're going?
I like that concept, but I want it to be developed by the people. So and if there was a federal program that said we could try it and I thought it was a net benefit, I would be all for it. But I have a problem with top-down control because in a capitalist world, greed pretty much will, if it doesn't corrupt it initially, it'll eventually corrupt it. And so think about single payer. I would sign it because I think it's a net positive. But I'm not confident in the future of it because health insurance industries will hate single payer and the drug industry will hate single payer, and they will do everything they can to get their profits back. And that's why I don't have a lot of long-term hope on governments doing things like solar panels on every roof. I would love it. I think that's amazing, but I want the people to be in control of it. And I want people to have, say, maybe a distributed node where one community can have their energy. And if their community goes down, the other communities can give them energy.
Well, sure.
And
I think that's
it's kind of a distributed way, as opposed to if the government did it. I don't really trust government to do it in a way that's going to be beneficial to the people long run.
Well, so I guess where I'm getting at is at some point there has to be an organizational group that heads this somewhere. And you can call it government or not call it government, but it's going to be a governing body of individuals. So what exactly are you proposing in a town that says, okay, we've voted, we're ready to go solar and put up our own node and connect ourselves up and charge our... So what entity does that? Somewhere the town has to get together, right?
Right. So I believe more in the concept I mentioned earlier of micro dictatorships.
Yeah.
And that is the open source economy on steroids. And what you'll find is that if some community says we want to do solar and we did solar, you'll have to fund it, and the communities are going to have to build it themselves. But once it's up, they'll say, here's how we did it. Here's all the costs. Here's all the inputs. You can maybe improve upon it, or you can do it yourself. And so you will have all that they did already available. And if someone else improves upon it, then the next person that does it can do it. And I think that is a better long-term approach for humanity than even a local government voting on something and then implementing it. Because I don't know about your local government, but our local government even screws things up. And we've had the retirement not being funded in our city for so long, and roads don't get fixed. It's like it's the institution of government which is inherently inefficient, and the institution of capitalism inherently greedy. And I don't think either of those long term are the solution. So if something happens that one of them can provide a solution, I'm all for it because I want to be pragmatic. But at this point in my life, I'm just not seeing much come out of government or capitalism that I'm proud of. All
right, but you're going into government.
Yep.
And then you're going to tell people, I have no faith in this place. I want to put all the power into your hands. Yes. So if we're getting back to what you said micro dictatorship, but to me, I mean, really the word co-op. So groups of people get together and say, let's make an energy co-op that's separate from government, although we're going to have to work with them on contracts and stuff because they do own the stuff that we have to connect to at this point. Right?
Yep.
You'd have to get it. So that's what you're really saying. It's just people get together, do it outside of the government proper. Right.
Yes, and if you the key is that you don't have to have one big co-op umbrella to do it,
right?
Because that tends to bog things down. Anytime you're trying to start a large project,
right,
it's difficult if you democratize the whole thing.
Sure,
and that's why I like the micro dictatorship part of it, and that gives people control of their own lives. And it's kind of I assume you know about Linux. For people who don't, Linux is open source software based on Unix, which is an operating system. And there are tons of flavors of Linux because it is open source and everyone can do whatever they want to it. And if you don't like whatever someone has done to their version of Linux, you can do your own. And it's the similar concept with the micro dictatorship. If you don't like what the Claremont community did with their solar installation, you can change it on yours and improve it.
I like that. Let me ask you this. Do you think you could do that with the voting system? We're going to have to vote for a while. I want to go to a direct one-to-one, here's how I feel, or direct government governing anyway. But how do you feel about using technology like that, maybe blockchain or something, to deal with our voting?
I am all in favor of putting our voting into the internet. And I know that's scary for a lot of people to say, because you're like, well, I want to be traceable. A lot of people like the hand counted ballots. I think voting if you really want to get people's representation in government, you can't just have a simple vote. It needs to be instant runoff voting or something like that.
Yeah.
And when you use electronic voting, that makes it that much easier. So let's talk about electronic voting, because that's kind of a scary concept. The way I envision that is that each individual municipality or town implements, based on some standard, their own open voting platform, and they can buy it and someone else has already developed if they want, but it has to be open source. And when someone votes, you can see their vote, not their name, but maybe a code, and they would only know their name to the code. But someone votes and you would see it in real time, who in that community voted. And there would be we have to wait for the vote tallies or anything, because a computer can do it in runtime. If you only have 200,000 people in your municipality, that can be counted on the fly. And there would be no voting errors, no counting errors. If your vote was changed, you could just look up, there's my code, there's my vote. Hey, my vote's not right. And everyone could do that. And everyone in the world could see the vote in real time. And that way, that would pretty much kill any chance for greed or corruption. Not greed, but corruption.
I mean, I'm with you there. I've always been in favor of that. A lot of people hate that. It's got to be paper. And I think until we lock down all the systems, we're probably going to have to use paper.
Yeah, I don't trust the voting machines. They have this weird, creepy USB port on the side that they say doesn't do anything. I don't know. It's like I've been in too much technology, and it's too easy to, hack a tabulator machine.
I agree.
I mean, I'm not that I know how to do it, but it's not rocket science. It's not difficult code.
No.
So if that's not open source and for everyone to view, in my opinion, you almost can just assume that it's probably not accurate.
You're right.
And even 60 Minutes did a piece on it where their voting machine right in front of their face, counted it incorrectly.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been talking on so much stuff. Laura Livengood, we have any questions?
I do have a couple questions.
Okay.
First, a short one from Jilly. Just based on what you're talking about, why do you identify as libertarian and not more like green?
The Green Party, I like, people like Ajuma Baraka. I voted for Jill Stein. I'm proud of it.
Hey,
so did we.
Me too.
That makes three of us.
Yeah.
But I don't trust government, and that's where the libertarian piece comes in. I'm still a progressive. When I go to bed at night, I have to know that my decisions were moral and just, and that's kind of what makes progressive. But my moral and just decisions no longer can put faith in government because, again, after 40 years, I've seen them make war normalized and healthcare access get worse. And I don't see that as being an accident. And I don't see that as a trend that we can really reverse within the institution of government. Certainly not with how divided the United States is right now. Our population is so divided.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And another question, and kind of interesting tie-in. What's your take on reducing violent community and police interactions through actual accountability measures?
I'm not quite sure what that means. I mean, the devil will be in the details of actual accountability measures. Mm-hmm. I'm all in favor of the police and the community interacting more. In San Diego, I actually spoke to them because they had a dog bite incident a few months ago where I looked at it and I'm like, oh my God, this police violence has, come home to San Diego, and there's a guy getting bit by a dog and the cops are standing around while the dog is biting this guy. I'm like, why aren't they panicking? There's a human being on the ground that's suffering, and that's not right. So we absolutely need more interaction between the police and the community, but not to sound like a broken record, this is one of those things that a healthier middle class will pretty much solve that problem. When people are stressed out, when don't have healthcare and they don't have money, they tend to commit more crimes and they tend to do dumber things. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, if the community is not that well developed, then the police department's going to reflect that. In the police department, they're part of the community. So if the community is not healthy, then neither is the police department.
That's great.
I'm curious though. I don't really know what the issue is with the police department or what the lack of motivation there is. I mean, Barack Obama, there was massive, I feel like police violence got worse under Obama, and he was talking about it, and I don't know the relationship between the federal government and the police departments and what can be done there. And I know Obama talked to some people, but it doesn't seem like it's rocket science to me to teach police officers how to defuse the situation. And right now I feel like they are so on alert. It's almost like they're afraid of the public because the public is a little scary right now because the middle class is shrinking and all that, and people are going crazy. So I feel for the police, but there has to be some way where the police can interact with the community in a much more humane fashion.
Yeah, I'd have to say I don't feel much for the police because they've made it clear that they're either going to be bad cops or silent. We've had no cops really stand up.
I have friends in the police department, and it's hard because I don't have the visibility into the police department, and there's no excuse for what they do. But if a large group of normally good people are doing something bad, I tend not to blame the people, and I tend to blame the system.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's the police chiefs. It's the judiciary system. When every cop that murders somebody gets away with it. If you're a cop and you murder a black person, you walk away.
Well, and there's certainly no incentive for politicians to insert themselves into problem situations. I will be doing that because that's my goal. I'm not in this because I want to move to Washington, D.C., and I think politics would be fun. I think it sounds like a miserable job. But I want to solve these problems, and I don't care about getting reelected. I care about solving these problems. So I would be the type of person that would be going headlong into these things. I don't know what I could do other than to talk to the police department and find out why they're doing what they're doing and offer up suggestions. I don't know that has really been done. And I also don't know, like you mentioned, the head of police. Well, the head of police has to want to make it better, and the head of police has to actually see it as a problem. The head of police may see the public as a problem, and as a solution, you just have to be that much more firm. Like some people like that, if someone stands up to you, you got to, puff your chest. And that very well may be what the police departments are doing.
Well, it may be, and that's where you get to training, because in other countries that are more socially forward, their police don't even carry guns. Right. They don't even carry guns.
Yeah, if you don't need it, there's absolutely no reason why they would.
Right, because they know how to diffuse a situation with their brain.
I almost feel like the advent of the taser made it worse, because it's okay to tase someone, but it's not okay almost to shoot someone. It's less okay to shoot someone. So now it seems like police are more likely to, instead of trying to defuse the situation, are going to use one of these non-lethal weapons.
Maybe so, but the statistics say that they like shooting people more and more every year. We've had like more than 1,000 shootings already.
That's so ridiculous. That's so absurd.
It is. Anyway, in your district, I don't know that I'm glad that you feel that it is where you are. I want to get away from all of that right now. I want to talk about. I want to play this video because we don't have a lot of time.
Okay.
I want everybody to see this video, and then I want to talk about unity and what Bernie's got to say in this. All right, so here we go, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I believe. Every great religion in the world, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, essentially comes down to do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. As a 22-year-old kid getting arrested in Chicago fighting segregation, I believed it in my whole life. That we are in this together, not words. The truth is, at some level, when you hurt, when your children hurt, I hurt. I hurt. And it's very easy to turn our backs on kids who are hungry or veterans who are sleeping out on the street. And we can develop a psyche, a psychology which says, I don't have to worry about them. All I'm going to worry about myself. I need to make another $5 billion. Hey, this whole world is me. I need more and more. I don't care about anybody else. I believe that what human nature is about is that everybody in this room impacts everybody else in all kinds of ways that we can't even understand. It's beyond intellect. It's a spiritual, emotional thing. When we say that child who is hungry is my child, when we do the right thing, when we try to treat people with respect and dignity, I think we are more human. That's my religion. That's what I believe in. And I think, most people around the world, whatever their religion, their color, share that belief that we are in it together as human beings. If we destroy the planet because we don't deal with climate change, trust me, we are all in it together. That is what my spirituality is about.
I remember seeing that live. I was like, wow, I've never heard someone actually a politician talk about their spirituality that way. I was definitely moved when he gave that answer.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that? How do you feel about religion in general and the mix of religion and politics that we seem to have, even though it shouldn't be there?
Well, a year ago, I considered myself a staunch atheist. And I had, as part of this journey, I kind of had a spiritual awakening. Oh. And I think the fact that people are bringing religion into politics really comes down to the fact they're fighting to keep some amount of their own culture, and whoever's culture that is, that's kind of the motivation. And the fear of a loss of culture is a powerful motivator. And I think that's why a lot of people bring their religion in. They assume that if someone's part of their religion, if they have that same core spirituality, that same general direction in life, that they must feel the same way about other things. And that's why I see a lot of religion coming into government.
Do you think that the same fix for everything, boosting the middle class, especially in terms of education, would help alleviate the reliance on religion?
Well, I don't know that we want to alleviate the reliance on religion. I don't think it's my position to judge others and their spirituality. I want other people to, I would love it if society was more open about talking about their spirituality. I certainly will be in this campaign trail. But I think it should be done in a way that you are saying, this is how I am, as opposed to other people should, become less reliant on religion. I think that's a personal decision. It's something that they should make, and something that I don't want to insert myself into. If I've noticed that, there's no reason to assume, given how diverse people are in every other aspect of their life, why would we assume that someone's spirituality would be the same as everyone else? So I can't make that assumption.
Right.
Where I struggle, though, is when obviously people's needs aren't met, and they then start blaming others. If it's on the topic of religion, it tends to blame other religions, and that has a problem. But the root cause of that isn't so much the religion; it's that their needs aren't getting met.
All right, I'll accept that answer. Only because we're running out of time, and I want to make sure we have you back, because we're going to have you back. We didn't cover so many things. Wonderful. And I want to make a shout out to we didn't even talk about this guy. We didn't have time, and he's not important. But what's his name here? Scott Peters. Mr. Establishment Dem. We'd love to have you on to debate Freeman Michaels, because we'd really like to hear about some of your positions on things. We really would. Freeman, please take a few minutes. Tell everybody why they should vote for you, and then what they can do to help you.
I am less concerned with people voting for me, and I'm far more concerned that people start to take the cooperative economy seriously. I got in this race. I upended my whole life. I went through a bunch of personal growth and an unexpected spiritual journey to do this. And getting me in office shouldn't be the goal. It should be people standing up and figuring out how to take control of their lives. In general, I think the law of the land, I mentioned this earlier, is people get away with what they can get away with. And a lot of debate is around, is healthcare a right or a privilege? And that's such a government perspective, like as if the government has the right to tell us what to do in that regard. So my response is that rights are whatever we take. And that's nature, that's the natural law. People will break the law if they can get away with it. And if you want to have the right to healthcare, then you need to work with your community to get that right, because capitalism won't give it to you, and neither will government. And if you want to have a right to food, you need to grow your own food, because again, neither of those institutions actually care about you long term. So in terms of why you should vote for me if you think I do a good job as a congressman. But I think right now people's focus should be figuring out how they can start cooperating with each other, because I think that's going to be our savior.
Nice. It's a noble endeavor, and it's more like an educational a campaign, and I appreciate that. Thank you for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
I'm really glad you come by. Laura Livengood, thank you for doing all that you do. The audience.
You're welcome. And next week we have, it's our last week of the year.
Oh, yeah.
For interviews. We have Jim Crary from Oregon District 2 and Mike McCabe running for governor in Wisconsin.
Nice.
Going to be the 18th and the 20th. And then we will start up again on January 3rd with Jess Phoenix from California District 25. That's our first interview of the new year.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody in chat. Freeman, you picked a song I'd never heard before, and it's freaking cool. I like this song.
Yeah.
When it's Stick Figure, Fire on the Horizon, you want to tell us why you picked this?
I asked on Facebook, maybe, I don't know, 6 months ago. I was like, does anyone have any music they want to share? And someone shared that with me. And it was as part of my spiritual journey or spiritual awakening. I was going on hour and a half walks for pretty much a year. And that was one of the songs that I started listening to. And it really kind of, it made me feel the campaign, as tacky as that sounds.
Nice. I like that, because it really is. It started and I was like, this is different.
Yeah. It's a good time. Good song.
So enjoy this, everybody. Thank you so much for being on the show. And we'll see you guys, whatever. Next Saturday. Here we go. Stick Figure, everybody. And all the links, of course, are in the description, Phil. You can get out of here if you want to, Freeman. I'll tell you your audience.
many miles.